Good morning and welcome to this WIOA Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Sheary with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic is integrating group discovery into transition with our presenter, Abby Cooper. As a reminder, all participants on the call are in listen-only mode. If you do have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post your question in the little chat box on your side control panel. Sometimes it's named the question box or the comment box or chat box, but all three of those are the same box that you can type in your questions and they will filter through to me, and then we will answer those questions throughout the presentation. Just a quick reminder that this webinar will be recorded. The presentation recording and any materials presented during today's web meeting will be available on our website, icsps.illinoisstate.edu, and on the Illinois WorkNet website within 48 hours. Tomorrow, each attendee will receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey asking about today's webinar. Please provide us with any feedback, comments, concerns, or suggestions you have to help improve any upcoming webinars. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our presenter, Abby Cooper. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. I thought you were going to, are you going to do yours? Oh.
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and do these polls really quickly. I'm sorry, I forgot about those. Here, we're going to go ahead and do two little housekeeping polls just to kind of get to know our attendees for today. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one live. We just want to know where your local area is today. So we have some basic options. If you could just give us a central area, and if you want us to know specifically where you're from, you can go ahead and type that in the chat box for us. But we'll give everyone a couple seconds, couple minutes to do this poll. Okay, it's slowing down a little bit. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share results. So it looks like most of you today are from the Chicago, Illinois area. We also have about 20% from Northern and Central Illinois and 14% from Southern Illinois, and then 4% from statewide area, which is awesome. Welcome all of our attendees. We're so glad to be with you today. And then the next poll we're going to do is what partner you represent. So similar to the last poll, if you want to go ahead and pick the best option that fits you, or if you'd like to be more specific, you can type it in the question box for us. But we'll give everyone about a minute to answer this poll as well. A couple more seconds for everyone to vote. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we have about 61% of you from Title I, 10% from Title II, no Title IIIs, and 21% from other WIOA partners, and then 7% for state or local workforce innovation boards. So again, welcome. Some of you did comment in the chat box saying you're with Centers for Independent Living, Title I, staff to the board, the NRS North Pulaski, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, office, south side of Chicago, Grundy County, LWIA 21. Awesome. Thank you everyone for attending today. I'm going to go ahead and hide those results, Abby, and then now I will hand it over to you for you to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for being on this webinar today. My hope is that from this webinar, you will understand a little bit more how to use group discovery as an age-appropriate transition assessment. I also hope you understand how to integrate group discovery into transition services. And you leave with ideas for next steps. And the reason I think it's important for you to leave with ideas for next steps is I firmly believe there's pieces of this that you can take and you can integrate into how you do business, but not do the whole shebang. So I want to spend a little time as we go through this in terms of what those elements are that I think might be useful for you. And I think before we get started, there's a kind of a poll on where your knowledge base of either individual discovery or group discovery.
Yes. I'll go ahead and launch that poll now. We'll give everyone about a minute to answer it. So if you could just go ahead and answer, what is your knowledge level of group discovery? And select one of the following: no knowledge of individual or group discovery, knowledge of individual discovery but not group discovery, or you have knowledge of both. Give everyone a couple more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share our results. So it looks like 74% of our attendees today have no knowledge of individual or group discovery. And then we have 16% that have knowledge of individual discovery, but not group discovery. And then only about 9% that have knowledge of both. So that's great. Hopefully you guys all learn a lot from Abby today.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for participating in that because it really helps me know how to frame this so you get a solid understanding. You know, transition is a time to learn what a student can do to be on the pathway to competitive integrated employment. And a lot of us work with a lot of students, or actually a lot of individuals, who the traditional pathway to competitive integrated employment is difficult. And one thing that group discovery does, it teaches us that we need to know more about that person in relationship to employment so that we can find a place where they fit. And a lot of us, what we know about a student is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. We don't really know how they function other than when we see them in our office or in our classroom, but we don't really know, what are the unique skills that we don't see. So one thing that group discovery does is it's a process of learning who that student is or can be in relationship to employment. And we all know, everybody on this line knows, you are different people at work than perhaps you are at home, because we all have our work persona. And for a lot of students who have more complexities to employment, it's figuring out who they are in relationship to work and how to utilize that to help them move forward. Okay, why doesn't my slide move?
I think you just have to click on your screen.
I clicked on the arrow and it doesn't move.
Click on your screen with the mouse. There you go. Now will it move for you?
No. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Okay. So one piece of individual discovery or group discovery that is really useful, and it is a piece that I think that you can use whether you're doing group discovery or not, is to think of employment in terms of tasks. Most of us think of employment in terms of the job description. And we go through it and we think the person we represent, they can do this, they can do that. Oops, they can't do that. So maybe they shouldn't apply. Or maybe I need to negotiate with the employer. But for people, particularly students who have a disability or have other complexities in their life, it's useful to start thinking about how you unbundle job descriptions, how you unbundle employment to look at what tasks your student could perform or the person you represent could perform and would put them in a really good light. You know, many students and many folks with disabilities or other complexities who don't compete well in the job market, they still have competencies to offer employers. This is just a different strategies to think about. If you think about the traditional labor market strategy and you think about how people get jobs, well, you interview, right? And if you have good interview skills and if you can kind of embellish your skills a little bit, you go to the top of the pile. If you're somebody who doesn't interview well and your ability to embellish is non-existent, you go to the bottom of the pile. So one thing Discovery does and all of customized employment does is it helps people think about what are they good at and what tasks could they do and how could that meet an employer's needs. The other, and in unbundling the demand into tasks and to take advantage of the discrete competencies there, it allows you to see more of what your student or your job seeker can do. Because frequently when we work with folks who have a lot of struggles in obtaining employment, we're always trying to fix it. We're always trying to say, well, you know, if you didn't tell your employer that you weren't going to do that job, if you kind of had better social graces, or if you had this skill, you would be more employable. All of the things we tell them based on their deficits are totally true. But the thing is if we can flip it and look more from a positive standpoint, it does a couple things. It allows us to believe in the person and that there's possibilities, and it allows the person to believe that, yeah, employment is an option for me. Group discovery also helps job seekers to understand the tasks that they have to offer an employer that can address an unmet need and improve workplace efficiency. Because this is really based on, I have these sets of tasks that I can do and I am proficient at and I am good at. And I've learned this through the process of group discovery. Now, the next step is thinking about what employer has a need for those tasks. And they may have an unmet need or it may improve workplace efficiency. And I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of our fun-filled pandemic and where we see unemployment skyrocketing. And we start thinking about people who have more complexities to employment. It's really important we start thinking about what tasks they can do and seriously think about what employer has a need for that task. And it might be a need they never had before. You know, never before had a workplace had to think about that they sanitize their place 3 times a day. I mean, there's lots of different little tasks that have come into being that didn't exist 3 months ago. So I think the more we can think and help our students or job seekers think in terms of tasks, the more potential we might see for people in our current predicament. Ah, ah.
Yeah, Abby, try to not hover over the bottom of your screen. It's pulling up that menu and cutting off
Yeah, the
those
trouble is I
tabs.
don't have a mouse, and so it gets, okay,
Oh, there we go.
okay. So group discovery differs from individual discovery. in the sense it is structured so that students are conducting this discovery process with the support of their peers in a group and a skilled facilitator interpreting the information. Regular individual discovery is something that happens between a professional and one person. And so the professional works with the job seeker to learn what their strengths are, their contributions, tasks they want to do for pay, their routine, what type of environment would fit best for them. And group discovery, that all happens in a small group. And there are many steps of discovery that are conducted through completing the homework. For each session, there's homework that the participants in group discovery need to perform and bring that information back to the group for discussion and insight. So if you think of it in terms of, I'm sure many people on the line have done job clubs. And if you think of it in terms of with a job club, you give people lots of information and then they kind of talk about what employers are looking for, how to dress in a job, how to present yourself in an interview. It's a similar approach, except that group discovery focuses far more as individual discovery focuses on the individual. So it's what strengths I bring to the table, and kind of it's called conditions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what conditions, what do I need to be successful? Everybody on this line has certain conditions around employment. We've all worked with somebody who would say, I'll do anything. I needed a job yesterday. I'll do anything. And then when you say, well, will you dig graves? No, I won't do that. So we all have kind of conditions. Some of our conditions are we won't spend more than a half an hour on the bus or more than an hour on a bus. Some of our conditions, maybe we need flexibility in case our kid is sick. And if we're a person who has a lot of complexities, well, maybe my condition is I need an environment where it's primarily men that work in that environment, because I have a tendency to not understand boundaries with women. And so I may inadvertently say an inappropriate thing to a coworker. Or maybe the condition, my condition is that I need a supervisor who's willing to give me positive strokes. Because if I don't get compliments on my work, then I get frustrated and I get frustrated and I quit. So in discovery, it's starting with who is this person and what do they need to be successful? What do they need to be at their best? Okay, so group discovery uses some of the same strategies, but it's in a classroom setting. What it does, it creates belief in the student and their family that they can be successful in obtaining employment that highlights the best of what they have to offer an employer. How many of you have worked with individuals who truly believe they can't find employment, who truly are so depressed and so discouraged with the amount of jobs that they have lost that they're chronically unemployed and don't believe that they can be successful? We've all worked with adults like that. We also work with students. For those of you who work with youth, we've also worked with youth who don't believe they can work. Their families don't believe they can be successful at work. And so they totally give up in terms of thinking that employment is possible. One thing that group discovery can do is to help create belief. And everybody knows that nobody goes to work without somebody believing in them. Everybody on this line had people that believed in them, that said, yeah, you can do that. You're capable of that. And we currently have students that don't have that belief. One thing group discovery does is is start to create that belief. And the approach looks at a couple different things. It looks at daily routine. Now, why in the world would we look at daily routine? Well, let's think about it. There's people on this line that are really good in the morning, right? You're like, you got your energy going, you annoy everybody else around because you you're ready to go. So you probably just naturally in that structure all the hard tasks you have to do in the morning because you know by the afternoon you're spent. There's other people who are really good in the afternoon. They hate those morning people. But by the afternoon, they're cooking and they do their hard tasks in the afternoon. You know, there's some people that are on medication and those medications impact them at different times of the day. So understanding, a person understanding, and as a facilitator in group discovery, understanding a person's daily routine and when they're at their best helps you start thinking about what type of work environment do they need. It also looks at activities because one big thing in either individual or group discovery is how do I translate? You know, if you're on a softball team and you're the person that's always tracking the score, well, you may say there's no correlation between softball and where that person's going to work, but there's a lot of correlation. This is a person that's good at statistics. This is a person that's probably good at math. This is a person that has good observation skills. All of those are skills you need at work. You also look at and help the student and the family think about where are their connections. Because we all know there's a whole network of people that get their jobs through their connections. You also in group discovery look at what a person's interest is. And there's different kinds of interests. You know, there's interests that you never want to turn into employment. I love to garden. There is no way under the sun I would love to be a landscaper. So there's different things that people like to do and they don't want to do it for pay. There's other interests that relate to the possibility of what they may do for pay. You also look at what tasks people enjoy doing. Because remember, we're going to try to translate those tasks to employers' need. And who they are in their home and in their community. Because earlier I talked about the persona. We have different personas, and you can see different skills in people in their home and in their community. And critically, you look at in group discovery what a person needs to be successful. So, all of that other stuff we usually teach in Job Club, which is critically important, isn't the focus of group discovery. The focus of group discovery and the philosophy behind it is really looking at who that person is and what they need to be successful, when they can be their best, and then to move forward in the job search. Okay, I'm going to go through this slide, then I'm going to stop for a second for questions, okay? Well, actually, I'm going to go through the next two slides, then I'm going to stop for questions. Group discovery is really structured to help people understand what they bring to the table. And we know how critical that is. We know how critical that is for students who are kind of naive about the whole world of work. And we also know how critical that is for your job seekers who have failed. Knowing what you bring to the table helps you kind of focus on what kind of environment do I need to work in? What do I need to highlight those skills? And it's also identifying what they need from an employer to be successful. Those are the conditions. Okay. So maybe what I need from an employer to be successful is for him to lay or her to lay out the rules for me and then leave me alone and let me do my job. Or maybe I need a supervisor that checks in on me 3 times a day. Or maybe I need a work environment that's really quiet because when it gets noisy, I get anxious. Or maybe I need a work environment that's very structured. But for every person, there's certain things, and most of us have worked long enough, so we know what we need from an employer. And we know that, oops, that's not going to work for me because that's just way too chaotic. And I hate chaos. Or that's just way too laid back. And come on, I want to pick up the pace. But we know this. We know this about ourselves. What this is doing is helping students and job seekers think about what do they need to be successful. And you want people to understand how to look at tasks rather than job descriptions. Because if you look at a given job description to determine employment possibilities, you narrow what's possible for you. But if you look at tasks and you can start bundling the different tasks together, then you see more possibilities. And for people who struggle with employment, whether it be students or whether it be chronically unemployed or whether it be folks with disabilities, they need to see possibilities. Everybody needs to see possibilities in order to believe they can work. And what this does by looking at tasks is helps people see possibilities that match their contribution. Then all of a sudden, work becomes feasible. It also, group discovery spends a lot of time of thinking about the different components of work. You know, where does it occur? What time does it occur? What is the environment? What is the speed? What is the demand? Because for anybody, there's different components of work that work really well for you, and there's other components that you say, okay, I don't like this, but I can do it because it has all the other features that I need. So kind of analyzing what are the components of work. Okay, I'm going to stop after this to take some questions. But in essence, group discovery starts with students learning who they might be in relationship to work. Now, if you're working with an adult, or somebody who has a lot of work experience, some of that is then learning who they might be in relationship to work, because frequently there's some people who have repeatedly failed at work, so they think who they are at work is not a very good worker. And so it's helping them rethink some of the things that they have learned. So it's in, who they are in terms of employment. This happens through a reflective process, through homework and guided conversations. Really spending time of having people think about the conditions they need to be successful. I once worked with a woman who, when I started working with her, she had had 10 jobs in 1 year and obviously had lost them all. And when I said to her, why do you keep going to office support? Because office support, every time you have an office support job, you lose it. You lose it because you have a learning disability. You're very charming. You have great social skills, but filing and taking telephone messages, those aren't skills that work well for you. And she said, well, that's what I've always done. So that's where my experience is. So kind of working with her to help her realize that that experience didn't bode well for who she was with work. And it didn't play into what her contributions were. So to help her think about what was the condition she needed to be successful and what were the contributions she brought to the employer was critical for her to quit losing jobs.
Yes, your
Okay.
screen
Thank you.
Be able to
So
advance it.
So why don't we, what questions can I answer at this point before we continue?
Abby, I don't have any questions that have come in thus far.
Okay. So then let me ask the group of questions. Is this making sense to you?
I did get someone who said, yes, thank you, it helped.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll continue. So group discovery is structured to help them understand what they bring to the table, what their contributions are, what their skills are, what their talents are, what unique features they may bring to the table. I once worked with a woman who had a pretty significant intellectual disability, but she had this unique talent. She could remember dates like nobody's business. She could know when your birthday was. You could tell her once when your kids' birthdays were. She remembered dates and people's birthdays and anniversaries and things that were important to people. That was a unique skill. And that was a unique skill that she could build on around employment. It was never anything anybody thought of as a skill other than, oh, well, that's cute. So kind of helping people think of what are the unique skills they bring? What's the experience they bring? If you're thinking of students, it's also what are the contributions that they'd like to build on. So would a volunteer experience help a student kind of expand their contribution and expand their knowledge? Would job shadowing help a student kind of think about, that's pretty interesting. In order to do that, these contributions might be useful. And we've already talked about, identifying what they need from an employer to be successful. I think I got to the wrong slide because we talked about the different components of work. Okay, they also, one thing that, I apologize, this is where we dropped out. They also need to really think about money, and particularly for students. It helps them kind of think about what they would do for money, and also helps them think about if somebody's taking money out of their pocket to pay them, then that means that there's certain conditions that they need to do for that employer. So it's a two-way street. It also looks at which local employers might have tasks and a need for them to be performed. So it's trying to look at, here's everything you bring to the table. It's really what group discovery focuses on. Here's the task, here's your conditions, here's your contributions. And then start thinking about where in the community might have a need for what you have to offer. Probably the hardest thing about group discovery, I think, particularly when you're working with students or young adults or people with limited work experience, it is the facilitation. Because a facilitator has to turn things into tasks a student might want to do. We are all very conditioned. We are totally conditioned to think of the whole shebang. We're conditioned to think of the job description. We're conditioned to think we need to do everything. And we're conditioned to think we've got to compete. And we all kind of like to win, so we all kind of like to compete. But this forces the facilitator to help the student break things down into tasks and help them start going against the basic thinking that we've all been taught. No, there's more than one way to get a job. If you can present how you can meet an employer's need, That allows you to present the tasks you want to do without the competition piece, which you don't do so well. It also, in the facilitation, helps students really be able to say what's cool about them, what they need to be successful. And the facilitator has to work really hard to reframe negative statements, because frequently that's where people live. Anybody on this line, or most of us on this line, can tell you in a New York second everything that's wrong with them. When I would ask any of you, what are your strengths, what are your contributions, after you got to about the fourth one, you would, your mind would go a little blank, because we are conditioned, one, to think we shouldn't brag, and we're also conditioned to think about what's wrong with us and what we need to fix. So one thing that a facilitator needs to do is help people reframe all that negative thinking into positive thinking. Group discovery, it helps people see possibilities. And I think it's a ton of fun, but I also think what's great about it, it creates a vision for people. It creates a vision for employment. And I don't care if that vision for employment is during the summer, I'm going to cut lawns. It builds a vision. It builds a pathway to start thinking that employment is possible. And we have so many people, whether they're students with disabilities or whether they're people who are chronically unemployed, who do not believe that they can be part of that world, who do not believe employment is possible. And on our current high unemployment, we're going to see more and more people that don't believe it's possible. And so we need to really think of different strategies of how we create visions for people. Okay, so if you're leading a group discovery, you need to be able to translate aspects of daily life into conditions, interests, and contributions that to be offered to an employer. So if I'm somebody who stays up, I can't sleep, okay? I fall asleep at about 2:30 in the morning, and then I sleep to 11. What might be a condition I would meet? And I can't see the chat box, so if you could tell me if anybody answers my question, that'd be great.
Yeah. Second shift, someone said?
Yeah, so maybe if I'm somebody who, exactly right, if I'm somebody who really can't get going till 11, then maybe I need to look at a second shift. Maybe I need to look at part-time afternoon work. But just telling me that I need to go to bed early probably isn't going to, because I'm probably not going to do that if that pattern is really formed in me. And lots of times we tell people to change their behavior. And we all know changing our behavior, even though we really want to work, is not an easy thing to do. So it helps you think about, it helps the student think about, what are their conditions? You know, what are their interests? What might be an interest that somebody would bring to tell you that you could lead to employment? I'll give you a quick example. I worked with a woman who was an incredible seamstress, but she just thought, well, that's just something I do. That's not a real skill. But it was an amazing skill. And as we started looking at that interest and skill, she who had difficulty focusing on a lot of things, but she never had any difficulty when she was sewing. So she ended up working for a company making Roman blinds, which is incredibly difficult and a really skill to have. So it's kind of looking at what are the interests, how does that move to employment, and then what are the contributions? Either they have to offer to an employer now or that can be built on. Because all of us, as we go through our working life, build on the skills that we have now that we move forward with. So one thing as a facilitator, what you try to do is translate this information. You know, one thing, but it's important that it isn't, you don't just jump. So for this quick example down here, you know, frequently performing certain tasks without being asked, it might indicate the student really likes that task. That might be one thing. If I'm always doing it and you're not asking me, maybe it's I like it. But there might be other reasons too. They may just do it because they see it as a way to be helpful and they want to be helpful. If you're in a classroom setting, somebody might offer to do it because they just want to get out of the classroom. So when you see something and you think, and you're doing group discovery and you're thinking, you know, this might be an indication of a task somebody wants to do, a contribution. One thing you're going to want to think about is what are the patterns? Do you frequently see this? Does a student frequently or does a person frequently demonstrate it? And if you only see the person in group discovery, then it's kind of asking some probing questions to get that person to think about what are the patterns related to this. Okay, there's two ways that you can think about group discovery and integrating it into transition. One is it totally aligns with assessment. You know, the Division on Career Development and Transition for Exceptional Children define transition assessment as an ongoing process of collecting data on the individual's needs, preferences, interests. And we've already talked, you know, we've looked at a person's needs. What do they need to be the best? We looked at their interests as related to the current and future working. And we look at how can this contribution you have meet an unmet need in the community, for employers. Assessment data also serves as a common thread throughout the transition process. So for those of you who are working in transition or youth, it's an incredible time because you can develop group discovery. You can have more than one group discovery. You can have it each year. You can look at the common threads of that you're starting to see in the transition process, and then plan for that, to define goals around that. And it can into the individual education plan. It also aligns with pre-employment transition services. And we know that pre-employment transition services provide to a student with disabilities who is receiving special ed or related services under Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or an individual with a disability for the purpose of 504. So what services can it align with pre-employment transition services? Job exploration counseling. You certainly can count group discovery as job exploration counseling. And you know, I would kind of, if I was doing it in a school and I wanted pre-employment transition dollars, I would not call it group discovery. I would call it job exploration counseling. Because really that's what you're doing in a group. You're helping a person think about what do they need to be successful on a job. It can also, you know, we all know that pre-employment transition services can also be work-based learning experiences, which include in-school and after-school opportunity experiences outside the traditional school setting, or internships. So it's quite feasible you have a group discovery, and based on that, that leads to a work-based learning experience. It also, in my head, fits with workplace readiness to develop social skills and independent living. And it also helps, I could also frame it as in terms of instruction and self-advocacy, because what you're really helping a student do is believe they can work and to understand what they need to be successful, and that is self-advocacy. Okay, it's structured as a job exploration. It's structured as a job exploration class or a group. Usually it would require 5 to 7 classes once a week for a half an hour, followed with this assignment that's completed at home, okay, and brought back. But you could structure it any way. I mean, it could be 3 classes that were 30 minutes and you only wanted to focus on particular elements. You know, it could occur in the classroom. It could occur as after school as a club or in the resource room. It could be broken down so that it's aligned with what is being taught in the classroom. At the end of group discovery, students have the information they need, hopefully, to create a successful direction for pre-ups, you know, for job shadowing, work-based learning, volunteering experience. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second to see if there's any questions before I go on.
Yeah, we had a couple. Someone said with the population that I work with, they would find it difficult to find a job in regards to skills if they lack the language. I don't know if you have any suggestions for them for that. It's not so much a question, but as
Okay,
a
yeah.
comment.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand the question. For the students you represent, it's hard for them to secure a job due to lack of language. Did I get that right?
It says to find a job in regards to skills if they lack the language. So I'm not sure if they mean specifically language or if they lack, oh,
Language of the skills.
yeah, she said if they know, even if they know the job, they are faced with other factors. So can we really motivate students if they are limited to location, language, and family?
Okay, yes. And here's I think and so correct me where I'm wrong in terms of maybe I'm not understanding your question, but I do have some suggestions for strategy. One is that if a student lacks the language, one tool I have found that is incredibly powerful is the visual resume. And helping that student think about what tasks they want to do, what skills they have, aligning it with pictures where they're doing some of those things and they look, this is a marketing tool, so you want that student to look good. And then the tasks they want to do for pay. I have seen visual resumes, and I can send you some that you can then send out to the group that have been very powerful for students. So one thing I would think about is combining it with pictures and particularly structuring it as a visual resume. The other thing in terms of transportation or where they live is an incredible struggle. And it's going to get worse because now people are afraid of public transportation, somewhat with good reason. So transportation is something that I think needs to really be thought out with the family and with the student, and looking. And what I tend to do when transportation is a huge issue is I tend to look at all the different variables that might be possible. You know, whether it's securing additional funding for them to be able to have somebody drive them, whether it's doing a work incentive from SSI to pay for a taxi to drive them, whether it's looking at the location of jobs that are close to where they could walk to or ride a bike to, and see whether that's a feasibility. But to look at everything, not to say, well, because they live in a rural area or because there's no transportation, this isn't feasible, but to really break it down to say, okay, what could be feasible and what would it take? I can also send you a name of a person that works exclusively nationally on transportation. So I'll send that too. I'll send you the visual resume and the transportation information, which might be helpful. In terms of parents, there's a lot of different issues. But in terms of parents, frequently students receive SSI, and parents worked really hard to get their kid on SSI. And that's supplemental Social Security income that folks with significant disabilities with no work history receive monthly. That cash benefit is a sure thing. You're talking all of a sudden to a parent about their kid working. That working is not a sure thing, and they're not really sure they believe their student can work, and then they would lose the sure thing of the cash benefit. So it's important when you're working with parents to really find out what the issue is. And is the issue that they're worried about losing benefits? Then make sure they understand that student can start working and keep the cash benefit and to get them with benefits planner. If the issue is they're afraid people be mean to their student, to their kid, then that's a different issue. And that's working with a parent in terms of what conditions do you need to make sure your student's safe. So I'm not sure did that answer your question?
Yeah, she said, yes, that answered it. Thank you. She
Okay.
said, that sounds great. Thank you. She did make a couple more comments about ESL students or child care
Okay.
in terms of that same question.
What do you do about childcare, or how do you make that work?
Yeah, if childcare is a barrier, I believe.
Well, that's a little bit out of my expertise in terms of, because I've never done either individual or group discovery where childcare is an issue, so I'm not sure I know. I think there's resources I know there's resources depending on your income level. So is it being able to find childcare, or is it not wanting to put your kid in childcare? One thing I would suggest is really looking at what's the real issue. And then building a strategy around that. That person is, a teen parent and they're in group discovery. Kind of helping them understand, creating that vision for them, I think would be the most important, because in creating that vision, if I have an idea where I'm going, then I have a better understanding of how I can make all of this work. And maybe I can't make all of this work now, but maybe, there's some things I can put in place that I can make it work 2 years from now. So having a longer picture. With English as a second language, if you're doing group discovery, then having interpreters in there, because it's important that people understand. It's the same thing if you're doing group discovery and you have kids that are hearing impaired. Have interpreters so that people understand the information.
Great.
Anything? Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, just one more. Someone did specifically ask, what is the specific difference between group and individual discovery?
What's the difference?
Yeah, what's the difference?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry I wasn't clear enough on that. The difference is individual discovery happens with a professional and the job seeker. So somebody pays me to do discovery with you. Frequently, it's through the waiver or through vocational rehabilitation. Sometimes it's through veterans. But I conduct discovery with you. And when I conduct discovery with you, it's a little more, no, it's a lot more in depth than group discovery, because I have the opportunity to go out in the community and observe you. I have the opportunity to interview people that know you well, that can tell me when you're at your best. I have the opportunity to go into your home and see what you do in your home and how you function there. So I have a more robust knowledge base. Group discovery is, I think it's good, but it's a group setting as opposed to an individual setting. So that's the big difference. It tries to take everything you do in group in individual discovery and do it in group discovery. And because I, as a facilitator, can't go to 7 different people's homes and go to their community in them, it structures that in terms of with homework. And before it starts, you ask who that person's going to help them with their homework if they need help. You may have conversations with the parents. This is why I need the information. Can you please help Abby do it? But it's really the difference between doing something one-on-one and doing something in a group of 7 to 8 people. Did that answer it?
Yes, I believe so. We didn't have any other questions, Abby.
Okay. So let's look at the information gathered in group discovery. We're going to look at situations and settings in which a job seeker is at his or her best. We're going to look at tasks the job seeker enjoys doing. We're going to look at typical routines of the job seeker's life. We're going to look at indications of interest, preferences, and satisfaction by the job seeker. Because there are some people who cannot tell you what they're interested in. There's some people that can't tell you what their preferences are. And that's why you go back to what are the indications? How many times does the person do this? What do other people say? You know, one thing I do in group discovery is I ask people to go and interview people that know them well and tell them 3 things that are really cool about them. And then bring it back to group discovery and find out, do they agree with it? Don't they agree with it? And to utilize that information. Because lots of people aren't used to thinking this way. So you need to set up situations where they can get the information. And you want to know about, you're going to learn about conditions that either need to be in place or avoided for successful performance by a job seeker. And you're going to, and this ties into, because for me, a lot of people that I work with have been on public benefits. So financial goals are important to me. Not that somebody says, well, I want to earn $500 by next week, but kind of, do you see yourself being part of the mainstream? What do you want to buy with the money you earn? How will money help you in your situation? How will it impact your life? You know, if I'm working with somebody and a student who, as soon as they have money in their pocket, they buy everybody they know something, so they have no money left. So then it's kind of like, okay, that might be something we want to think about as a condition. When you go to work, maybe it should be direct deposit into your account. But kind of looking at how financial goals and money factor in to working. Because there's certain people that will tell you Well, what's the point of working? I can earn more on SSI or SSDI. Why should I work? So kind of looking at how people think about money and how they think about it in relationship to work and what are their concerns. Okay, this is supposed to be, oops, sorry. I need to go back one. This is supposed to be a cute little chart, but it obviously didn't come through. But it's really looking at the different ages of a student. And when a student's first starting out, 14 to 15, you're going to want to think about tasks they should try, contributions they want to build on, job shadowing opportunities. And I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but there's all these cool programs that have come out about virtually job shadowing. And that's probably a good resource in our current climate. Volunteer positions to build on the belief that the student can and will work, and translating information. As they get a little bit older, 15, 16, 17, it's work-based learning that builds a student's contribution. It's just as important to know what you don't want to do as what you want to do. And many of us knew after we did our first job that, whoops, this is not for me. But you got to have that experience because you don't know what it's like until you try it. You're going to be a little bit more sophisticated in understanding the needed conditions and taking all this information and translating it for what's needed for competitive integrated employment. When we start getting to where a student's going to be graduating or leaving school, then it's really good if all this information builds to the creation of a paid job, and the job highlights their contribution, and it negotiates the conditions. Let's go back to the transportation question, which is a great one because it plagues everybody. It might be by the time the student goes to work, there needs to be negotiation with that employer. I know all of your employees start at 7 in the morning, but I want to work with you to figure out how Abby can start at 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever time due to lack of transportation. This is what we've worked out for her to be able to get to work. And as you can see, it's quite elaborate. And so the negotiation with the employer around conditions that are necessary for the person to take the job. And tasks done for pay that reflect a person's interest. All of that we hope will be in place by the time a person graduates. Okay, so some tips for group discovery. Depending on the level of your student, sessions might be broken up. They might be a lot shorter. If you're working in group discovery with students who need more assistance, then having a teacher's aide would be really, really helpful. And if you're working in a group where some students have English as a second language and some students don't need that, it's really important not only to have probably you're going to want an interpreter, but you probably also, if possible, to have a teacher's aide there. You want to figure out, based on the level of your students and who you're talking to, or your job seekers, you want to design it so it's interactive. Just like it's really hard to sit on a webinar where you're just listening and you don't get to interact, it's really hard to sit in a group that's not interactive. You want it to be interactive. You want it to have energy. So you want to put some thought into that. When I already said this, but before you start group discovery, you should know who at home can help your student with homework. And you might want to have a parent meeting explaining what you're going to go over and the purpose of it and how parents can assist. Okay. I have found it's really good if you're doing group discovery, give every student or give every job seeker a notebook with each session laid out and the sheets for the homework. I really think, and I said this before, but I'm going to say it again, so practice it if you ever do this group discovery, is reframing comments so they're positive. Nobody will ever hire me. That's a pretty negative comment. So you want to reframe that. You want to reframe it and say, well, Jim, tell me when you've been successful. You take that little thread and it's like, why wouldn't somebody want to hire somebody that could do that? But you really want to frame the negative comments, because what you got going, the biggest thing with group discovery is you're either working with job seekers or students who have limited knowledge and frequently have negative self-images. So the more you can make this positive, the more you can make it energetic, the happier and better it'll be. So we've got a discovery notebook. I like to have poster paper to create a job board. And each person has a job board. And the posters should be divided into the following sections: contributions, tasks, money, condition, what works for students and employers in the community. Who's ever doing it, whether it's a teacher, whether it's somebody at the America's Job Center, they should create an example of the board so that the people know what they're going to have when group discovery ends. I have found it really useful to have videos or pictures of people working so that you can show people different work settings. And you can say, what in this setting would work for you? What won't? Okay. And large paper that you can post on the board and write on, and obviously magic markers. So the topic group discovery covers is the discovery process, how it's about what's cool about you, and how that leads to the job. Different ways people get jobs. Tasks the student does and would like to do. You know, what their contributions are, what their skills are, their experiences, personal traits, personality traits, what they have to offer. And just as important, the type of situations that don't work for them. You know, I once worked in an office at a consulting firm where nobody talked to anybody. Everybody emailed each other. The only time anybody talked to anybody was when you're going out to lunch, and then they asked you to get some lunch. And when it was time for my review, I got a really good review except for one thing. And they said, you laughed too loud. And I thought, okay, this is time for a new job, because there's nothing I can do about my laugh. And I actually don't want to be in a work environment where people aren't allowed to laugh. So, you know, what situation doesn't work for you? And then the components of work. Your routines. What responsibilities do people have? You know, this goes, if we're working with young adults, what responsibilities do they have at home? Lots of people have responsibilities. It may be childcare. You may be the one that's responsible for the childcare in your house. That will frame what hours you can work, because everybody expects you to be home taking care of the younger kids. I think it's important to also know, and I like to find out what people look forward to. One, because it gives me a better clue on who they are. Also, because if Aunt Sally's wedding is next June and you're in it and you're looking forward to it, you better be darn tootin' when it's time to get a job and you're applying for a job in early June. You negotiate that time off. Interviewing, you interviewing people who know you when you're at your best. For depending on the level of student you're working with, sometimes I include informational interviews or tours, because I have been amazed at how little people know about the work environment. Now, informational interviews and tours may now, in our current climate, have to happen virtually, and maybe that's something that could happen virtually within a group discovery. I don't know. I've never done it virtually. The type of supervisor somebody needs is really important. And probably most people can't tell you that, but as a facilitator, as you learn, as you go through the group, and as you know this person, you start to know what they need from a supervisor. And you can help them think about that and the type of work environment. Obviously, we're going to also want to know hobbies and interests. And is there anybody, to network with? Is there anybody in your community that you're good pals with, that you volunteer for? They're probably a good person to networking, whether it's networking for a job, or whether it's networking for a reference, or whether it's networking for connections. And money, what do jobs pay? How do they pay? Is it direct deposit? Is it on a prepaid debit card? Is it the standard paycheck? But how do they pay? Taxes? I'm amazed how many people don't realize they have to pay taxes. It reminds me of my daughter. On her first job, she called me up and she said, "I'm quitting my job." And I said, "Why?" She said, "They took taxes out. And I'm a teenager. You do something. You work in this field, Mom. Can you do something about my taxes?" No, everybody pays taxes, and no, you're not quitting. What are the work incentives that can help somebody with transportation, with clothing, but what are the work incentives? And where is the person at their best? Okay, before I go on, questions, editorial comments?
We did have a question. And then remember, we do have that poll.
Right.
Or do you think group discovery is feasible during transition? So let me know when you'd like me to run that.
Okay.
The question we have is, what are some rules of thumb about how far to go in the psychological shaping of a person? For example,
Okay.
they have skills that for whatever reason they don't want to pursue, or they want to do something where they have no observable or measurable skills.
Okay. Read me the whole question again so I answer the right question.
What are some rules of thumb about how far to go in the psychological shaping of a person?
Okay.
So, for example, if they have skills that they don't want to pursue, or they have an occupation that they want to pursue, but they don't have skills for that occupation.
Okay. One thing, okay. I have two kind of contradictory answers. One is, if this is coming up in group discovery, I would always go back to what a person's strengths are, and as a facilitator, and I would probably do some exercise with them based on those strengths. Where do you think a person, not necessarily you, but where do you think a person could use those strengths in those skills? If a person, I once worked with somebody who had 14 felonies and wanted to be a security guard, and he was dead set on it. He was a bit of a bully, so he would yell at you. But it was like, he wouldn't believe me. He was going to go to the governor because I was preventing him from being a security guard. And it was like, okay, let's do this. I have just made a list of the 10 top security firms in Seattle. And I have structured you with questions to ask them. And after calling every one of them, you still think you can be a security guard, then we'll try to figure it out. But you need to do this first. And it was really sad because at the end of it, it was so clear to him that no, he couldn't do it because of his past. So then it was kind of like, well, let's look at what you can do because you've got some great skills here. So it's kind of trying to weave in reality one way or another. Now, if somebody, so let's take somebody wants to do something they have absolutely no skill with. I guess what I would do too, and this isn't so much in group discovery, this is just some more under counseling and guidance. What I would do is first look at, is it feasible that he or she could acquire the skill? If it's feasible that he or she could acquire the skills, what would it take? 4 years of school, apprenticeship, what would it take? Then the real question is, are you willing to put that time in if this will get you over here? That would probably mean 4 years without pay. Is it worth it? Or is it worth it to take the skills you have, work part-time, utilizing those skills, and then spend the rest of your time acquiring new skills for the profession you want? So I would always try to do it as of the pros and cons and what a possible solution is. I try, unless it's just there's no way under the sun, I try to always reframe things and not necessarily say no. But with my security guard guy, it was like, no, I can't do that for you. So I'm not, does that answer your question?
He hasn't responded, but I believe you answered that very well, Abby. We did
Okay.
have another question, and we have about 5 minutes left. We want to be respectful of everyone, all the attendees' time. And I know you have a couple
Okay.
more slides too.
Okay.
So
So I'll go
we
through these slides quickly, and then
yeah.
we'll do the questions, and we'll forget about the poll. Okay?
Sounds good.
So the questions that group discovery can answer during transition is, what are the threads that can be built on to secure a successful employment experience? What can be learned from the individual who knows the student well? When is the student at his or her best, and how does that translate to a work environment? And what needs to be learned now and in the future? I think those are the key things that, and also, what are the conditions that need to be in place for students to succeed? Those are kind of the key things that you can learn through group discovery during transition. And what do we want? Why do we do this? We want belief that students can work in competitive employment with support from the family. We want a plan that we can build on over the transition years. We want environmental features that lead to success. Okay. We want skills the student can offer an employer and what type of tasks highlight those skills. And we want effective support strategies that will allow the students to grow. Okay, we're going to skip this. They all have the slide, right? But this is basically what people can do in a perfect world. In a perfect world, we use group discovery as an age-appropriate assessment that we build on each year. We work with parents so they set expectations for their students to be working competitively upon graduation and create responsibilities at home and share when their students at their best to the teachers. And we have the vocational rehabilitation system that shares their expertise with the schools and participates in group discovery and funds group discovery under pre-ed. Remember, I said perfect world. So to recap, group discovery is the process of learning who a student is in relationship to employment. The purpose of group discovery is to find a direction during transition that facilitates successful vocational opportunities. And group discovery can be structured in a variety of ways. So can I have the two questions?
Yes. They said one thing they noticed is that you didn't mention volunteerism when you mentioned hobbies and interests. Is this something you encourage in your youth?
Yes. I think, and I apologize. I think volunteerism is great. And I think every kid should volunteer. I think it increases their skills. It helps them frame where they want to go. It helps them start knowing what they like and what they don't like. And if the volunteerism can be outside of school, I think that's even better. And I think it's great if kids can start volunteering around age 13, 14. So I apologize for not bringing that up. I think it's great.
And then we did have a comment for the person who asked what are some rules of thumb about how far to go in psychologically shaping of a person. His feedback question or his follow-up question to your answer was, so strong doses of reality are the best actions.
I'm sorry, say it again.
He followed up the question previously with, so strong doses of reality are the best actions.
So a strong dose of reality is the best action. Sometimes it is. It depends on your person, but I use reality. With that fellow, I use reality because I've tried everything else I could think of. And sometimes what I say to a person is, I don't know how to do what you're asking. I just don't know. So if you can find somebody else that can do it, great. But I don't know. This is what I can do for you. So I think sometimes it's really important to know, to be clear on what your boundaries are. The other thing that I've done with people who are just stuck on something that, makes no sense with where they're at. I don't do this in do group discovery, but I do it when I work with a person individually, is I do a contract. I mean, it's not a formal contract, but I will do this for you. You will do this. And we break it down, what they're going to do and information they're going to bring back to me and what I'm going to do. And anytime I can push the offer the responsibility to the person I'm working with and seeking employment, the stronger their employment options are going to be. So,
All right.
anything else?
We don't have any other questions, Abby.
Okay.
It is 11:30. Did you want to go ahead and do those polls for your own feedback?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. If people have
We'll
time,
just,
that'd be wonderful.
we'll just take a couple more minutes and do them really quickly. We have, do you think group discovery is feasible during transition? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. We'll give everyone about 30 to 45 seconds to answer it. It's a pretty quick question. And then while our attendees are answering that question, I did want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, and the slides and corresponding handouts, as well as the YouTube recording of it, will be available on Illinois WorkNet's website, as well as our Illinois State ICSPS website within 48 hours after this webinar is over. It's just a quick reminder. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll now if you've had a chance to answer it. And share the results. So it looks like about 76% of you do think it is feasible to implement group discovery during transition, which that's great feedback. And then I'll go ahead and prompt the other poll, which is our last one. If you could go ahead and answer this for us quickly, based on what you heard today, which elements of group discovery could you implement? So give everyone about 30 to 45 seconds to answer that. Okay. A couple more coming in, so we'll give everyone a couple more seconds. Okay, it looks like we've slowed down, so I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share our results with everyone. So it looks like about 73% of you said that all of the elements of group discovery you feel you could implement in your field with your constituents, so that's great. 11% thinking about jobs in terms of tasks, 9% helping students think about their contributions, and 7% helping students think about their conditions. So great feedback. We appreciate you taking a couple extra minutes with us this morning to
Yeah,
answer
thank you.
those polls. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. As stated earlier, tomorrow each attendee will receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey asking you about today's webinar. Please provide us with any feedback, questions, comments, or concerns, or suggestions that you have to help improve our upcoming webinars. And then Abby, if you have any final words of wisdom or thoughts.
I do, just for that. They're not words of wisdom. It's just that I will send you a visual resume because I mentioned that. And I will also send that information on transportation if you could share it with everyone. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I'll make those documents available on our website with the PowerPoint slides for this webinar.
great. And thank you, everybody. And I apologize for losing the connection and you all having to sit there waiting. So thank you for staying with the webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. You all have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Bye-bye.